Hi, I'm Tim, he's Brian, welcome to WatchBox, and thanks for logging on. As ever, we are the team with a theme, and today the theme is yellow gold. All these watches are for sale on the new, redesigned, and lightning quick thewatchbox.com. Brian, lead us off. What have you got?
So I'm going to lead us off with a Patek Philippe 5146J. For me, Patek Philippe, when I think yellow gold, I immediately think two brands, Patek Philippe and Rolex. Here I have a Patek Philippe 5146J. This is their current version annual calendar in yellow gold. Now, Patek Philippe patented the annual calendar movement in 1996. This is the most current version of that watch. You have the Arabic numerals 12, 3, and 9. Unlike the 5396, which is also an annual calendar movement but featuring apertures, this has all the information displayed on the dial. Now, when many brands were transitioning from yellow gold into rose gold, Patek Philippe was one of the few brands where A, yellow gold had always been a pillar of the brand, but B, it stuck with it and again has always produced all their watches in all of the different metals, being rose gold, yellow gold, white gold, and platinum. So I think that as far as yellow gold goes, it has a special place in the hearts of all Patek Philippe collectors. It for sure has a home within Patek Philippe's brand, even though as a percentage of production, it is probably the least produced of all the different metals.
This is a fact. Yellow gold at Patek is interesting, obviously because traditionally yellow gold denoted richness and an upscale ambiance. But what's also fascinating is that Patek often gives it pride of place in production, often launching the first model of a line in yellow gold or deciding to end a line with yellow gold, as it did, for example, with the 5970 and possibly now with the 5270. So yellow gold has always been special at Patek and given a special succession order or primacy in production. Now you can also see this watch features a lovely off-white lacquered dial that adds a lovely glossy gleam with all yellow gold appliques. It has a real nice contrast, and you have the polish of the gold with the luster of the lacquer. All of this loomed, by the way, and there's a lot going on. Annual calendar, Patek's 1996 innovation. It is a calendar that needs one adjustment per year, the adjustment from February to March. You have a power reserve indicator at 12 o'clock. There's a moon phase down at 6, just above the date, and the timepiece has a lovely sort of bilateral symmetry. You can split it down the middle, and it's very even. 39 millimeters in yellow gold. You can see on the wrist it wears nicely. It's a traditionally sized watch, and I've always been of the opinion that traditional size is most appropriate with yellow gold, just because it is so powerful. It has a lot of presence. Too much of it, and it can overpower. Now, a few things to note with this example. It's a very early one. It features the original deployant clasp, and you can see it features a spade-style buckle on top of a flat stamped swing arm internally. So that's a very early clasp.
It transitioned in 2009.
Exactly, and you can see what that 2009 buckle looks like, because we've got one right here. And that's actually an accessory add to this 5070. We'll talk about that later. Brian, as you mentioned, there was a transition later on. Just as in 2009, there was a transition to a new signing standard on the movement. Now, this watch came out in 2005, and I believe this is probably a 2005 example. There's the buckle. There is the fact that it uses the older 315 base rather than the later 324. And of course, up until the middle of 2009, Patek Philippe used the Geneva hallmark on its movements, and this caliber 315 has that. So you have the Geneva hallmark, the caliber 315, you have the old style buckle, and I do believe this would have been one of the original 2005 launch editions of the 5146. That's a real cool piece. Also, maybe you want to do a wrist check real quick, just so people can get a sense of your wrist rather than mine.
Sure.
I think it's always helpful, and while you throw that on, I'll show off your watch. We're going to do a wrist check because your watch is more interesting than mine. Tell me a little bit about this piece you're wearing today.
So I am wearing a early brass resonance from FPJorn. Now, it's not a yellow gold watch, it is rose gold featuring a salmon dial. The dial itself has patina in places over time. This was one of the first FPJorn pieces that I purchased for myself. I've had it for many years. It's probably, my favorite watch. Again, I've always loved the proportions, the symmetry, the dial. I'm a big salmon dial fan, as you know, if you've watched the shows that I've been on before, I talk about them all the time. And for me, that sort of faded salmon look that looked aged and weathered was just absolute perfection.
And it's a real cool piece. One of the interesting things about this watch is that the movement train was actually based on the Passot 7001, and that's particularly true in the early resonance models. You can also see that the brass resonance has a different bridge arrangement than the subsequent gold one, as the click springs and ratchet wheels are visible above the bridge, whereas they would be hidden. You just see the pivots on the gold models. So this is a real cool piece and a fun one. And again, in 38 millimeters, it does wear beautifully. The fun thing about today's theme, yellow gold, is that it's almost impossible to feature an FPJorn watch because there was only ever one officially and a few straw gold pieces.
So I don't know if we're going to be able to get the exact, oh, there we go. We got a good view. So the watch itself, as far as size goes, fits my wrist nicely. We probably have a similar sized wrist. But for me, as far as the tones of the metal go, I personally find that rose looks a little bit better on my wrist than yellow does. I only own one yellow gold watch. It is a Patek Philippe. It's a 5130J World Time with a special dial. So,
fun piece too, an important Patek Philippe complication. The annual calendar is distinctive of Patek because they invented it, and at 39, that's probably just about the perfect size for a modern dress watch. And this one's darn close, though it looks significantly larger. This is the SBGH 266, 39.5 millimeters yellow gold. This is the 9S 20th anniversary limited edition of 150 pieces from 2018. You can see it features the mosaic dial with these signatures of old school Seiko, the original Dai Sakosha. You can also see that the dial features those lovely applique yellow gold indices and matching hand-finished hands at center. So these are tiny diamond milled components that are artisanally crafted. Externally, you can see that distinctive 9S case form, and it does have the Zaratsu black polish here executed on yellow gold, which is extraordinary now. So this is a handmade dial in large part, a hand-finished case, and an interesting feature that you'll find on the reverse side is the caliber 9S85 in a sort of hot rod configuration. You know that because of the gold medallion. So whereas the standard watch is +5 -3 seconds per day, this one's rated +4 -2 seconds per day. High beat like a Zenith El Primero, 36,000 vibrations per hour, 55-hour power reserve. And although the watch is a dress watch in style, somehow it's still 100 meters water resistant, so you are getting a lot of value here. I'm going to get as close as I can so you can see the mosaic dial right here. It's a sort of explosive, billowing, overlapping spiral pattern. It's easier to see in person, but you can see the intricacy of this dial is first class. Grand Seiko really a brand on the rise.
yeah, no, I mean, you know what? This is for sure a watch purchased out of love. You know, it's as far as Japanese craftsmanship goes in the watchmaking industry, this is as good as it absolutely gets. Beautiful watch. It really is hard to pick up the intricacy of the dial through the video. It's a watch that's best felt in person because you get a feel for the warmth of the yellow against that, you know, bright white dial.
And it is a very, should I say, expressive watch with the white silver dial, and it's more white than silver, as well as the yellow gold. This is a piece that leaps off the wrist. You can see edge to edge, lug to lug. It's actually got a nice fit on a smaller wrist. There's a lot of clearance to neck down to a smaller wrist, but this timepiece does have an incredible superstar presence about it. So if you're looking for absolute discretion, I would say look for something smaller. If you're looking for a watch that is distinctive of its brand, handmade, and sort of the alternative to the common Swiss dress watch, that's definitely what you're getting here. The most ironic part of this watch, even though even the strap is made in Japan and Seiko makes its own lubricants, stones, and shock protection springs, you might just be able to see that the buckle itself is actually made in Italy. I don't know why, but I always thought that was curious and a little bit humorous because Grand Seiko is the ultimate integrated manufacturer.
I also think that this is the watch that lends itself to being able to go on a lot of different strap options. Like, I think it would look great on a blue suede. It looks good on brown croc. You could transition it to black croc to be a little bit more dressy. So many options out there just because of the, you know, the white dial against the yellow being very utilitarian.
Definitely. I think I might even go as far as to throw a black croc on it and then go with the yellow gold stitch for contrast. It gives you a lot of options.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, moving right along. So we're going to go with the GP next. So here we have a Girard Perregaux Foudroyant Rattrapant chronograph. So this watch is from 1999. It's a Scuderia Ferrari limited edition from that year. Now, number one, this watch is over 20 years old. So the fact is this exact watch was being produced today it would be made in rose gold, simply
Yes.
based on the market dynamics. But again, in 1999, yellow gold was in vogue, and this is the watch that was produced. So unlike a lot of the Ferrari limited editions of today, you have very subtle branding on the dial just with an SF, which for me, I like that, right? Like if I'm gonna be looking at the dial of a watch, I wanna focus in on the brand itself, and if there's subtle branding, great, but I don't know that I would want a prancing pony there on the dial. As far as as far as the movement itself, you have a crown activated split second chronograph similar of the Patek Philippe 5370P. You've got the Scuderia Ferrari branding on the case back. You've got a powerful all yellow gold bracelet. To me, as far as the wow value factor, you're buying the equivalent of a Ferrari car with this watch for the price of a Fiat.
Absolutely, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think what really stands out with this watch is that if this were made by another brand and marketed today, not only would it be rose gold, but frankly, on a full bracelet, it would probably be a $50,000 watch.
Oh, more for a split second chrono? I mean, it's
yeah, automatic and a foudroyant and a split second, all of that, and full bracelet. I mean, it would be one of those things that makes your eyes tear up price-wise. So this is a great value on that basis. Now, what's really fascinating here is that you get the foudroyant 1/8 of a second system, and you get the split seconds. The foudroyant hand is red. The rest of the hands are gorgeous blue, and then the hands that tell the time are yellow gold. I've always thought this dial was evocative, not so much of any Girard-Perregaux, as the Patek Philippe 5070, and having them both here on the table, you can really see the resemblance. The vertically oriented Arabic numeral applique in gold, the leaf-style hands, the registers flanking the cannon pinion at center.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You see what I mean right there? And I'm sure that wasn't...
That was not intentional.
No, that right there, someone had an idea, because this watch came out a year after this watch, 1998, 1999. One other thing that I like about this watch is the fact that it's a tribute to Scuderia Ferrari. So if you look at the reverse side, you can see it says 1929 to 1999. And of course, you know, Ferrari started making road cars in 1947. But back in 1929, Scuderia Ferrari, the race team under Enzo Ferrari, existed before the road cars, and it was the factory Alfa Romeo Grand Prix team. And so Scuderia Ferrari actually predates Ferrari the company by almost 2 decades. Ferrari the road car came long after Ferrari the racing team. And inside the case, automatic winding, it is a modification of a Valjoux 7750, and this was actually executed by a company called Jacquet that later became La Joux Perret. And it's a fascinating, tough, and versatile movement that gives you everything you love about the 7750 with a few high horology enhancements and a column wheel conversion. The watch looks huge, but believe it or not, it's only a 40 millimeter. So while it's got a ton of wrist presence, and really this thing is the brass ring, it also has the ability to work well on a smaller wrist. I think this is a lot of presence and a lot of performance, to use the automotive analogy, for a very reasonable amount of money. And it's an authentic link, as from 1994 to 2004, Ferrari and Girard-Perregaux had a co-branding agreement born of the relationship between Luca de Montezemolo of Ferrari and Luigi Macaluso of Girard-Perregaux, both Italians, both into high performance, and agreeing on this by word of mouth. It was far more organic and ultimately more memorable than the Panerai Ferraris that came after. That's a really nice piece.
Yeah, I thought so.
I would even go so far as to say, while there are attractive steel and white metal versions of that watch, I think it is more potent in yellow gold and more special. I think, as you said, because Girard-Perregaux and yellow gold were both bigger in the 90s, I think that's also a great icon of its age that hasn't dated in any negative respect.
Right, no, and I think that, you know, when you're looking through it almost in a time capsule perspective, this watch in its day was a massive success. Because if you're watching the show, you're thinking like they put a yellow gold bracelet on a foudroyant chrono. Like, but again, when you go back into when you go back in time, you know, it's no different almost than a Vacheron or an AP coming out with a complicated watch on a yellow gold bracelet. So, you know, I think that as we spoke, you know, the watch itself, as far as the movement goes, is as good as it gets. There's tremendous value there. It's not a common watch that you would see on a yellow gold bracelet. And as far as the limited edition goes, the the bracelet, I don't believe it was delineated based on a bracelet or strap. So I think that a lot of them were available in straps versus the bracelet. I don't think it was an addition of each.
That is correct. It's interesting to note just how well made the bracelet is too. If you were going to get a bracelet back then, you were getting something that was made by Girard Perregaux, just like the case was. In the early 20th century, they bought a company called Bout, which was a specialist case maker, and the legacy of that lives on here. I think my favorite feature is the fact that the dial itself is slightly off-white. If this were silver, it would just be a little bit too bright, too harsh. The fact that it's slightly off-white makes it much warmer, and that's a mistake companies often make with yellow gold watches. Not the case here. And because we mentioned the limited edition, 250 pieces. So a scarce animal indeed.
What do you got next for us? Sticking with the chrono?
A big name and a modestly sized watch. We're going with a Daytona from 1996 T-Series Rolex Daytona Zenith El Primero based caliber 4030 and a glorious silver white dial with matching yellow gold registers and yellow gold Arabic numerals. It gets better because this is an original Rolex tritium dial. Remember, the changeover to Luminova was 1998. This is 1996, and all of that original faded luminant is still present on both dial and hands. Now, taking this watch and throwing it on the wrist, the nice thing about the 40mm automatic Daytona is that Rolex basically got the design right in 1988, and it's made fine-tuning alterations. It's never really redesigned the watch, so the look of this watch has lived on through the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and it's still current as of 2020. The Zenith El Primero movement was changed by Rolex for this watch. It became free-sprung rather than a mobile stud index. The flat hairspring was replaced with an overcoil. The beat rate was actually tuned down to 8 beats per second from 10 for the sake of durability. Rolex also COSC certified and 5-position adjusted the movement to make it a chronometer, and the timepiece also includes a Rolex winding system rather than the Zenith winding system because the Rolex system is more robust. So there were a lot of changes, and Zenith had a special room at its manufacturer in Laloc where it built the Daytona El Primeros exclusively. It's still 100 meters water resistant, so if you want to throw it on a modern day aftermarket water resistant strap, you can easily do so and swim with it. It's nice because in a lot of respects, automatic 100 meters chronometer, sapphire crystal, it's a real vintage watch, there's no doubt, at 24 years old, but it's a vintage watch that you can wear with the carefree ease and confidence of a modern watch.
Good pick.
Yeah. I'll also mention, this is where you can see the age. Rolex clasps have changed over the years, as have the Patek Philippe clasps, and you can really see how this one's a lot more basic. Also, that it's in really good condition. It uses a clamshell locking system. A fun watch to own, and again, most people who are shopping for Zenith-based Daytonas are looking for the steel watches, and the gold models are still a really nice buy right now.
And you know, I think we spoke about, it was either the last show or the one before, just about the transition to Oyster Flex.
Yes.
How, you know, at the end of its production cycle, the Daytona on crocodile strap wasn't the best of performers. You know, the watch did much better either in all gold on a bracelet or in all steel. They then transitioned it to the ceramic bezel, and it did slightly better on the strap. And then transitioning again to Oyster Flex, and the watch itself has absolutely boomed as a sports watch. So, you know, I think that Rolex has always just pivoted in the right direction. And, you know, as you had mentioned, this watch definitely does have those vintage vibes, being that it's from the 90s now, almost, you know, again, we're going to be approaching 30 years. And I think that it's a really cool piece of Rolex history, and at not a crazy vintage watch price.
Also worth mentioning that production of these was constrained by Zenith's ability to make the movements. The in-house Rolex watch, while still a fine product, has been made in innumerably greater volumes, precisely because Rolex could control the movement supply and ramp it up. On Zenith's time and Zenith's capacity, far fewer of these were made because you had the Daytona El Primeros, you had other El Primeros going to other Zenith customers, and then a few left over for Zenith's own watches. So these were very constrained in production, and I think these are the next class of collectible Rolex. You know, the vintage, I guess, bargain hunting from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s is over, and now people are trying to get ahead of the curve for Rolexes made in like the second half, the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s, and that's a great example of one way to get into that. The yellow gold, and I'd say the two-tone, still a little bit undervalued.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's amazing. I just had the opportunity to deliver to a client a steel Zenith Daytona from 1999, And this was, it was from the original owner. It was literally new old stock, had been sitting in a safe, still had stickers on it. And it was just such a cool thing to see a watch that is, call it, just about 22 years old, being in that type of condition without having been serviced or polished or anything like that. And just, comparing it to a newer style piece. And you do feel the differences in the case, the look, the overall presence, the feel of it on the wrist, the bracelet, and it's just, you see those changes that Rolex has made over time, for sure.
A lot of fun with these. I gotta say though, we've got another Rolex.
We've got another Rolex. So, as I mentioned earlier in the show, for me, there's no, yellow gold, I think Rolex, and I think Patek Philippe. So, here we have a two-tone GMT, nicknamed the Rupier for the, because of the color scheme of the dial and bezel. You've got that warm brown tones. This watch has, interestingly enough, been reissued in the Rolex collection now, but in rose. Yes. So it shows you how the tastes of consumers have changed over time and how there is a bigger pull towards rose gold watches. But the original iteration of the watch, it came in two-tone in steel and yellow, as well as all yellow gold. For me, what a cool, interesting watch. You've got that shiny brown dial. You've got that mustard yellow bezel, mixed with the brown. And, again, I just think that it's an often overlooked GMT relative to how the Pepsi and the Coke bezels watches perform.
Yeah, this example is late 80s, 16713, a timepiece that has a lot of presence and also period charm, and that's something we discussed with the GirardPerregaux being yellow gold and GP from the 90s. This is very much a Gordon Gekko era Rolex watch. I remember Gordon Gekko, I think he had a yellow gold Cartier of some description. So this isn't a Gordon Gekko watch so much it is of his time. And you really do get the vibe, late 80s, big hair, loud music, supercars like the Lamborghini Countach and the Ferrari Testarossa on the poster in your bedroom. And when you were that kid looking at that Lamborghini, this was the power watch. Whether you're an aviator or an armchair aviator, it's still a heck of a lot of fun to wear a GMT Master and Dream. And because it is still a relatively modern watch as these things go, it's a sapphire crystal and it's 100 meters water resistant, so you can still wear it like a real watch. You don't have to baby it like you would a Daytona or a GMT from the 50s, 60s, 70s, all watches from those eras, and I recognize the Daytona wasn't made in the 50s, but I'm grouping old watches together and contrasting those with this. This is still an everyday wearable watch, a daily driver, and frankly, because it's not exactly a concours watch, it's a strong daily driver by condition. You can also wear it without worrying about putting a force field around your wrist. This is a timepiece that you can wear to enjoy.
Looks great on the strap also, sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, of course, please.
I see a lot of individuals that own this watch take the bracelet off and put it on, different straps.
Yeah, it looks great on textile. In particular, I think it looks great on Velcro, on NATOs. I think you could also put it on alligator and dress it way up, which would be awesome.
Brown suede all the way.
Brown suede would also be comfortable and badass. The appearance, anything you can key to the dial is going to make the most of the watch. And of
Mustard
course,
yellow too, would be great. On the strap.
Oh, I'm all for it. In fact, I would even say you could double up and go one side brown and one side mustard and match the bezel to the strap.
That would be cool.
That would be fun. All right, so that's a good piece and just a lot of fun.
I think you're going to bring us home now.
I have this to dream about. This is my favorite yellow gold watch of all time. And while I regret that I can't run my grubby fingers over it, that's to your advantage, as this Patek Philippe 5070J, part of a model series made from 1998 to 2002 in yellow gold, it is just returned from Henri Stern factory service, meaning it is as good as it gets in terms of condition and running order. When this watch debuted at Baselworld 1998 at 42 millimeters, broad and wide as a saucer, this awesome machine was, at the time, the definition of an oversized dress watch. Remember, back then, 40 millimeters was considered to be a very generous size for a dress watch, and there were many Pateks in the catalog that were between 32 and 36 millimeters. This thing bowed at 42, and it was instantly on par with the likes of the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore and the Panerai Luminor. It was that big. It's also gorgeous, with the dial inspired by the reference I believe, 2512 in the Patek Philippe Museum. The original was 46 millimeters, so if anything, this one's scaled down a little bit. But that's where the shape of the case and more than anything else, the layout and the graphics of the dial come from. Now, this is a watch that does feature the Lemania-based caliber, and the nice thing is it has been freshly serviced. It's also covered by a little card, so I can't show it to you. But rest assured, Geneva hallmark, the epitome of elegance, and highly modified by Patek Philippe, among other things, with an overcoil hairspring, a 5-position adjustment, a free-sprung balance, and a 65 versus 48-hour power reserve. So while this movement is related to the caliber that went to the moon with Omega, it is a hugely advanced and refined Patek Philippe take on that classic Lemania 2310 Bausch. This is my favorite yellow gold watch of all time, and I adore it.
And it's funny that you mentioned the similarities between the GP and this watch, because we brought it on another show, or you may have. The same limited edition Scuderia piece is made in yellow gold with a black dial. And you could compare and contrast the color schemes of the two, but that would probably obviously look even more similar to the 5070. But for me, the 5070, what a watch that you wish existed today. In this, the exact same watch, and then let's call it with the in-house movement. But the black dial against the yellow gold, while traditionally a dressy combination, like how cool when that dressy combination is now in a larger, sportier type piece.
Absolutely, and I gotta say, one of the most, I talked about the off-white coloration of this dial. One of the best features of this 5070J dial isn't the fact that it's punchy and black, it's the fact that all the printing is a sort of gilt yellow gold that contrasts in a way that's not explosive or ostentatious, but subtle, potent, and beautiful. This was an all-time great by the family Stern. To this day, it is my favorite simple, time-only Patek Philippe manual wind chronograph, and still a looker on the reverse side. You're going to have to take my word for it, but Patek CH2770 on the reverse side of this thing is an all-time great, just like the watch. You can also see the watch had a little bit of a pagoda bezel, as there are many individual steps leading up from the edge to the lip of the sapphire, and this was to help build up the profile of a watch that was far larger than its movement, and Patek did a wonderful job between the bezel and the dial of actually cloaking that and turning it into a visual asset.
I would love to see it with luminescent hands.
Yes. That would be super cool, and I think that's a little bit where Patek started to go with the 5170s. In particular, I think if you look at the 5370P, you could see how subtle the incorporation of lume can be. I think the watch really would have been assisted by that, but again, back in 1998, no one had any thoughts about looming a dress watch. All right.
Well, awesome. This was great.
Brian, if people want to reach out and purchase any of these or inquire, how do they contact us?
Well, they can either reach out to me through email, brian@thewatchbox.com, or through Instagram, just my name, or they can reach out to you directly also.
That's right. I have a contact address, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, for any pricing questions, availability, conditions. I do reviews on request sometimes, and frankly, I just love to hear from you guys. So reach out to tmosso@thewatchbox.com for anything you see here.
And also, if you have any ideas for future shows, we're always interested. Please
comment below.
Comment below. And lastly, if you're going to comment on me wearing a plaid shirt, I'm just going to get out in front of it. I consider it now fall once the temperature drops to 65, so expect to see a lot more plaid.
Yeah, and this shirt, I pull it in a ball out of my dresser, and as you can see, I just throw any old thing on. So if you don't like my shirt, again, comment below. Your views count all the same. Time out, Tim out, Brian out, and thanks for logging on.